people who don't want assisted suicide, but they are being pressured to commit suicide that was never there before this thing was sanctioned and legalized. We only have one crucifixion in the entire history of crucifixions, where the Romans put a guy out of misery. The Romans never did anything to shorten anybody's misery. I think the UK has done something very, very commonsensical. I'm very happy that they were able to make the breakthrough, and I hope we do too.
There is a story out of the UK that the UK Supreme Court says that the legal definition of woman excludes trans women in landmark ruling. Okay, and this is in the UK. Under the Equality Act of 2010 refers to biological sex, excluding trans women from certain legal protections based on sex. Unanimous decision was celebrated by gender-critical campaigners, seen as a victory for the protection of single-sex spaces such as changing rooms and women's refuges, I guess, which just being shelters or things like that.
In the current administration too, and certainly with respect to the Congress, there's a lot being done to try and guarantee those protections as well. But in the UK, the privacy concerns, certainly, like changing rooms and locker rooms, and certainly the sports equity concerns, where you have transgender people just dominating a sport, or dominating the competitiveness within the sport. Those things just have to be taken care of, and biological sex matters in that context. No matter how you identify, your biological sex could give you a real advantage, and does give people a real advantage. And of course, the privacy concerns, obviously there are very real differences going on there, and those very real differences are in a locker room are just invasive. So I mean, that's the I think UK has done something very, very commonsensical. I'm very happy that they were able to make the breakthrough, and I hope we do too.
Right, and in fact, I know in the United States at the time of this program, obviously, just Maine is one of the ones that's having at least some legal issues over that particular situation with competition. It strikes me sometimes I've seen, and maybe it's anecdotal, which of course it is, from YouTube or other places, and you see these fights happen sometimes between men and women, and you're starting to get the idea that maybe some of these young women have believed some of this stuff about how things are very similar until they get into this fight, and some gentleman takes her and throws the woman across the room horribly, but just the disparity in the physical differences that are there just for the average person. Oh yeah,
upper body strength. There's no comparison, and arm strength. I mean, obviously there are a couple of exceptions to these kinds of things, but by and large, there's a huge generic differentiation. And I mean, to get a wallop from a person who has a hand twice as big as yours, and has a bicep twice as big as yours, an upper body chest capacity and shoulder capacity that's 1.5 to 2 times greater than yours, and you take a wallop right to the face, you're going to know when you're going down, hey, this is different. And even though you say, oh, there's covered by boxing gloves. Let me tell you, you get a gorilla hand inside that boxing glove. It's different from an average size hand in the boxing glove. And anybody who's been in a bout knows the difference. And you don't put a heavyweight against a really good bantamweight.
Well, you said it right.
Why would you do that?
That's why they have weight classes. They've always that's why they always had these things, to separate out, because it isn't fair, and you want to make it fair. And of course, you're referencing what happened even during the Olympics, where that one fighter said, I got hit and that was it. I could say, this guy,
she was all over,
Right. He said, I could tell just from the one punch, it was like so much different than anything I had dealt with in fighting.
Ever felt,
right, a biological woman. So.
Oh yeah, when your jaw's about ready to come off, and your brain is literally pinging around inside your skull, you just think, wait a minute, this is for real. Biological sex matters.
Let's get to a question. Dear Father Spitzer, I really love your show and appreciate your insight into so many varied topics. I've been married for over 30 years, appreciate what a blessing my marriage has been. However, I've met young Catholics who state they want to be married but have never met the right person. After years of searching and praying, they tend to be resigned that they may not be called to marriage. Is God calling fewer people to be married, or does today's culture set people up with false expectations as to what marriage is? Is there one person in God's plan for us to marry? Dan.
Well, Dan, the problem is you can't find a perfect companion because no human being is perfect. There's always going to be a flaw somewhere. And there's always, we have to just learn to live with that. I mean, that's just part of marriage where, okay, there's some weaknesses here, or there's some frustration here, or there's temper over here, or, there's maybe slowness or lethargy over here. There's always going to be something that's going to frustrate people, about a person. But at some point, we all have to come to the realization that as we look around, don't we tolerate a lot of things in our friends? Well, of course we tolerate it, but I have to live with this person intimately for the rest of my life. I got to be absolutely sure. But nevertheless, the standard, every time, you think about it, the standard just keeps going up and up and up and up. And finally, of course, nobody's ever going to be able to meet the standard. So I don't think, Dan, that it has anything to do with there are not enough people out there, who could be a suitable mate for somebody. I think the problem is the criteria are so in the skies that nobody's ever going to be able to meet those criteria. And at the end of the day, the delay keeps going on. And then all of a sudden you say, well, I'm 35, I'm nearing 40, childbearing age is going away, I have lots of friends in my group that I like, and I get to meet some women on the weekends. I'm okay. I really don't, think about family life anyway. Maybe I'm just not destined for children and family. And the rest is just rationalized away. And it's a perfect example of the perfect is the worst enemy of the good.
Right, absolutely.
And exactly, you set up the criterion for perfection, you'll never find a human being.
Right, and you've got the culture
that's going to be able to live up to it.
And the culture is supporting that kind of mentality anyway, and it's not moving. Another question, dear Father Spitzer. Maybe it's due to the change in the political climate, but I noticed a lot more stores will be closed on Easter compared to years past. It seems everyone closes for Christmas, but too many Easter is just another day. Granted, Christmas is important, but it's not as important, obviously, as Easter. Without the resurrection, our faith would not be much value. This is your thoughts on this from Dave. Are you sensing at least a sensitivity, maybe more so out there than we've had recently?
Well, absolutely yes. I mean, it's definitely, you have to split it up into the baby boomers and the Gen X's versus the millennials, the Gen Zs, and the Gen A's. So I mean, but with respect to the baby boomers and the Gen X's, it is kind of interesting. There seems to be a greater and greater appreciation in those generations. For religion, definitely. Bible sales even are up, I think, something like 22% or something of that nature. And now interest, this is post-COVID, so you'd think, religious interest might be down after COVID, but actually among the baby boomers and the Gen X's, interest in religion is actually increasing. And the idea too of interest in things like faith and science and a more intellectual academic kind of approach to theology, getting some distinctions back in. They're taking moral life seriously. That's starting to happen with the Gen X's. Maybe it'll drift down to the millennials too. I'm not sure, but right now, millennials and Gen Zs and Gen A's are still following another trajectory. But I think some of the reason for that trajectory is not that they're not interested in religion. They're under the misimpression that science and religion are somehow contradictory, or science has disproved faith, or most scientists are atheists, or other kinds of things, or they have a disagreement with the church's moral teaching and
Right.
in a couple of the major social issues, and so these things are kind of driving that difference. But those questions can be answered,
Right.
and there's a lot of excellent stuff that that's what we do at the Magis Center. And if people are interested, just go to magiscenter.com. We do have a lot of answers to these questions, and that's why I publish the books I publish, including that one with EWTN, Father Spitzer's Universe, exploring the big questions.
Right.
So, I mean, those questions are definitely being answered, and so try to do that anyway. So I think we can kind of, if we can get to the millennials and to the Gen Zs, I think education's one way of doing it. I think sometimes trying to get on some podcasts where there's a great deal of of appeal to the millennials especially, and to a lot of Gen Zs. And EWTN does podcasting to that group with me. I think we can get a lot of the word out there, and maybe start creating that drift back to religion when we get the questions of the legitimate questions of those two generations answered.
Well, following up on that quickly, just before we get to the books, we don't have a lot of time, but a person wrote, Dear Father Spitzer, I read a couple of interesting articles this week about the very high numbers of young adults entering the church in both England and France this Easter. France has experienced a 160% increase in baptisms over the past decade. I do believe that young people are thirsting for something more than what the secular world has to offer, but do you think this is something that will persist? Will more young people come into the church, and will those that enter remain? Emma.
Well, Emma, I can tell you, if we the church do what we should do to answer the questions of these young people, they have an intrinsic interest in religion. I think everyone is built that way. I do think we have an intrinsic interest in religion. Remember, up to about 75 years ago, like 97% of the world was religious. I mean, that doesn't happen unless there's sort of an inbuilt desire to be connected with an absolute, to be connected with something of ultimate significance, eternal significance, that would have a pathway that would give our life a permanent meaning in an absolute context of meaning. I think all of us are built that way. We are basically ultimatizers. We're transcendental beings. And young people as well as older, I mean, it's just there. It's not in our genes, it's in our soul. And we really do have a transphysical soul. And that connection with the absolute is part of, in my opinion, that desire for God. And by the way, as I've said many times in the program, the American Psychiatric Association has done these, the surveying and the studies of this religious desire, and essentially people who are not religiously affiliated, by comparison with people who are religiously affiliated. So people who are not religiously affiliated have doubling and tripling of depression, anxiety, suicides, suicidal ideation, substance abuse, antisocial aggressivity, and unfamilial tensions. So that's just, something's wrong.
Right.
That person is unhappy. When you got that kind of steep increase in depression, anxiety, and so if you kind of alleviate that, if you start going to church or finding some religious way of connecting with the absolute, the emptiness that we feel, right? So when we're shaving in the morning or something, we're looking in the mirror and nothing of substance is staring us back. We feel a terrible emptiness within, right? Or we're just walking outside and we feel like, gosh, we're out of kilter with the whole darn cosmos. It's all dark and unfeeling and cold out there, and I'm out of kilter with everything in kind of the larger cosmos. Or I'm sitting with my family and feeling incredible bouts of loneliness in the middle of a family that I get along with really well. Well, what's missing? God. in a nutshell. The absolute, right, is missing. We need a being, an interpersonal being, that's perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and home. And as Augustine said, I mean, God was a genius, right? For thou hast made us for thyself, and our hearts are restless, really unhappy, until they rest in thee. So, I mean, that's the good Augustinian moment.
Okay.
But I think he's absolutely right. And so I do think they've got the drive.
Right.
All we have to do is begin to answer their questions and their challenges,
and,
about,
right.
let's sit down and talk to, about these things.
And speak the truth in love, as they say in Scripture, but
make sure. Speak the truth in love, yeah.
Another story, one that we've kind of talked about, internationally, and especially a focus on Canada, but we've also noted the fact that the United States is far from being not involved. Illinois Catholic bishops are urging opposition to Senate Bill 9, which would legalize assisted suicide for terminally ill patients.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, as I said, assisted suicide, you say, well, why would you want to, if the person there wants to commit suicide as a matter of civil rights, why would the Catholic Church, have something to say to a person who is not a Catholic? Well, you can't commit assisted suicide. That's his right to request it and to want it. Well, aside from the fact that if a person is requesting assisted suicide, there is not just a problem with pain, right? Because most pain can be palliated. So that's not the problem. The problem is definitely there's something psychologically going on the brink of depression and despair that should be treated and can be treated very effectively, according to Kathleen Foley at Sloan Kettering, very effectively. Now, the point that we have to talk about here then is, well, why does the Catholic Church care anyway if that guy wants to commit suicide and he's in a state of despair? The Catholic Church can be as concerned as they want about that guy. Well, why should they step in? It's not so much the person who's requesting assisted suicide. It's all the other victims that are created that are not the person who's requesting assisted suicide. I'll just name 4 groups that you can just get, it's a whole, we're creating 4 new victim classes.
Right.
Number 1, we've got what I call the physician shoppers victimization, right? So, in this, many cases of this, have been exposed. And I won't go through all the names right now, but you have an elderly lady. She's getting, the memory loss is a little bit there. She doesn't have outright dementia, but, she gets frustrated and she's a little bit temperamental. Daughter doesn't want to deal with her anymore. She's using up funds anyway that the daughter could use. So the daughter basically says, Mom, I think you want to commit suicide. And of course, the mom goes, no, I don't, no, dear, I don't think I do. And of course, she goes out and, she talks to the family doctor, and the family doctor goes, I know your mother. She doesn't want to commit suicide. Get out of here. So the next, she goes to the next person, a psychologist. Mom, just take this nice psychological test here, and we'll just see how you're doing. And of course, the test is being used to see whether or not she wants to commit suicide, but she's not being asked the question, right? The psychologist says, no, this lady doesn't want to commit assisted suicide. She goes to a third person, a psychiatrist. The guy goes, no. As far as then she goes to, somebody who is a psychologist working for the insurance company. Remember, the insurance company has a vested interest in this. I'll get to this in a moment. And so the psychologist who's working for the insurance company goes, yeah, she really does want to commit assisted suicide. And of course, then the daughter badgers the mom into taking the pills. She commits suicide, frankly, against her will. There you go. Well, that doesn't happen in the United States. Oh, yes, it does. And anybody who wants those cases from me, just send me an email, and I'll get Spitzer at manchacenter.com. I'll get you those cases because it's appalling what's going on here. But that's the first victim class. People who don't want to get, don't want assisted suicide, but they are being pressured. Right. They're being pressured by not just relatives, sometimes by doctors, sometimes by friends, sometimes by people who have a vested interest in the person's will, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a brand new pressure now to commit suicide that was never there before this thing was sanctioned and legalized. Why are we doing this? Why are we promoting this? Why are people actually funneling money into, compassionate choices? Used to be called the Hemlock Society.
Right, I
Why?
remember, right.
Why are they doing this? It's just like, I'm baffled. What kind of jolt are they getting?
It's usually
Amsterdam with the suicide wagons.
A lot of times it's funded by very rich foundations who are concerned about population control, and a lot of times as to what's driving a lot of this stuff. Absolutely. You say the relic known as the Shroud of Turin can amplify our understanding and reinforce the rational validation of Jesus' crucifixion, death, and resurrection. How so?
Well, of course, the Passion of Jesus, to begin with, is writ large in great detail on the Shroud of Turin. And it corresponds remarkably to the gospel accounts of Jesus' crucifixion. So as we go through this, if you go to you just went through your Passion Sunday Mass just a couple of days ago. But now, as Good Friday approaches, just think about this comparison. On the Shroud of Turin, I won't go into the details now. I'll get to it later. Right. But the main thing is the bloodstains on the shroud reveal that the man on the shroud was crowned with thorns. And the thorn that was used to produce those bloodstains that are on the shroud, remember, there's an image that the bloodstains are on. That image comes from a very high level burst of radiation, for a real microsecond, 1/40 billionth of a second, something along those terms, or particle radiation that's equivalent. But anyway, the image is there. It's a highly accurate three-dimensional photographic negative image. The main thing to see is that those blood stains show a thorn that is very much like the Syrian Christ thorn. This is a thorn that's prolific in northern Judea and Jerusalem area, and just the surrounding areas in Syria. So you say, well, wait a minute, is that thorn around in Europe? No, that's something that's particular to the Middle East. And by the way, the crown on the man's head is like a helmet. It's a Middle Eastern crown. It's got a top on it. It's not a Roman crown, which is a circlet. So whoever wove that crown of thorns, there's some kind of a Middle Eastern background that's there. You can see that the thorn is definitely from the Middle East. And by the way, we only have, in the whole history of crucifixions, which is an immense history, right? We only have one history where the man is crucified with a crown of thorns. The man in the shroud is crucified with a crown of thorns, constructed of Syrian Christ thorns, which is, right there in the northern Judea, Jerusalem area where Jesus is crucified. And you can see that it's made in the way of a Middle Eastern person, not like a medieval European circlet. The gospel accounts of Jesus's very unique crucifixion, I mean, those accounts are proven by the shroud beyond doubt. And I'll talk about why I think the shroud is authentic. The 1988 carbon dating has been completely debunked. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But the main thing,
I think you'll probably be talking about that on the next show if my timing is correct here.